as well as the status of SAPO. The other items will be more of matters committee. Of course, I want to, as I would be giving to the Deputy Minister, as we usually do, to use this as an opportunity to speak to the members of the South Africans in terms of importance, in a way giving an overview of these matters that are coming before the committee. And the approach we have taken, Deputy Minister, as you know, would be that they will be guiding us in terms of our presentations. So we always prefer to have and summarize and just have the presentations, complete them, and then only engage at that point. So we would, in that scope, give you the opportunity to do so, and we'll guide if Mr. Shalenga would be just doing the overall summary, or if the entities would give us silent points only. We are doing so because members would have received the presentations. They went through the presentations that now been assisted in case of technical failure. Those who are present here with hard copies. I take it that would improve in that regard to Mr. Foss, because we are a communication and digital technologies, but for the community from us in terms of paperless environment that needs to keep. So, the Minister, just for purposes of time, I would want to indicate that what is not more than 5 minutes doing the overview, and the other 5 minutes to introduce the letters we want to introduce. That's like 10 minutes, and therefore allocate the next 15 minutes, which will then complete the first hour on the presentations. And as I said, because members have gone through the presentations, it's really to release the silent points, and most of the issues surely would come out of questions that members would have. And therefore entities may want to elaborate as questions that responded to. So we're doing that to try and manage time, but also create space for engagement. I'm sure the team is ready to proceed. Number 2. I do get a sense that those that are on the virtual platform are indicating on the chat that we can't hear. So just wanted to be sure that you unmuted the mic on the side, on the virtual platform side. That your mic is on also on the virtual side.
Well, I wouldn't know, Chair. I've always been speaking to the mic.
No, what I'm saying is that you have two mics. You've got this one that is here physically and yours that is on the gadget. So I was just checking if that one is unmuted or if not, that's fine. So they can follow you.
I thought it's not permanent, but it's just
That's what I thought too. Until the IT settings. Okay, we're just trying to sort it out.
Chair.
Honorable Kubeka.
Oh, are you still there? I've heard that it's quiet, so that is why I'm trying to check.
We are still clear, so we'll just check as we get to
Okay.
the presentation.
Okay, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, sir. We can now get to the presentations. Honorable members, this having been said that there's no consolidated report, and you have got anyway reports that you went through. Let me then give Honorable Mulala, I wanted to speak before that.
Thanks, Chair. I think we yes, someone must mute. Yeah. Maybe if I use the mic, will it be fine? Yeah, it's on. Hello. Yes. Now, am I audible? Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think we appreciate the fact that the ministry has not been informed that they should prepare a summary, and we agree with that. However, we think because of the many presentations we have today, it will be ideal if Dr. Shilembe, because he has been doing the oversight every day running, could at least paint a summary, even if it's so that each entity is not given more time, because otherwise you will end up not being able to go to the city. So I'm agreeing with the proposal. However, I'm emphasizing that Mr. Shilembe should do much more than the deputy minister has requested, so that when we go to entities, at least we have sufficient time for engagement. Thanks, Chair.
Honorable members, may I then rule that we proceed this fashion. And this ruling is informed by what the Deputy Minister would have advised, that they didn't consolidated report and only on the matters of consequence management that would have the department talking to that from an entity oversight. And that would take the presentations and have made a reasonable assumption that when members received the information, they processed it, and therefore would not be getting that for this time in the meeting. It is for that reason that the entities will take us through certain points that need emphasis in the presentations. And we will then take the presentations, see how far we go, and then take a discussion on that point. So I don't think the expectation is to read line by line when we've received the information and processed it, and which was the capacity of members to process information that comes for them. Like I said, we will give space out to such presentations. We'll assess as we did because we have time until 1 o'clock, so there's still time on our side. So let's assess it as we move. With that having been said, Deputy Minister, I understood you to say SAPO authority to be the first to present, and that they can then proceed to do that. Of course, with limited time, because they also had a separate item to present. But I'll give an indication. I think on the matter of a live meeting, we agree on that. In fact, it's members who have complained a number of times that the meeting has to be physical, and we had agreed to have physical meetings. This would have been a start, so it's not like there was any intention to exclude any participant. And we have now tried it that if the room is not equipped to be hybrid, like M46 as an example, it will be difficult to communicate. So it's either you are here or you tender in approach that helps. And we'll move along those lines. But there's always a start. So at least we have got a kind of evidence now that it's difficult to manage such a situation, even with the communications and digital technologies committee. Right? But Deputy Minister, as I said, we're making this ruling on the basis of what you've raised, and we think reasonable in that scope. The SAPO, you want to know how you get prepared to proceed, but just ensure so that I don't come in between. Ensure that you are still here on the virtual platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I just be request sharing of our screens enabled. The name is Geert Betaille. I am with the South African Post Office. Thank you. Chair, may I request that sharing be enabled? I am unable to project my screen. Thank you.
Otherwise, there's no problem. The Minister, if there's CEO will present from here. but it is on the basis of how they wanted to approach the presentation. We'll give to you.
Morning, Chair. Thank you very much. I will try and be as quick and as succinct that we need to be. There's a lot of matters that we need to discuss. We've prepared a presentation for today as indicated. I trust that my screen is visible at this point. Thank you very much. So we've got 13 items or 13 matters that we really want to discuss. So when we're going to be talking about the financial position, if I may, I will be giving over to our acting CFO, Mr. Lenny Govender, who will take us through. And then really at point 5, I will then take over again. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair, and good morning to the colleagues and honourable members. Kiet, next slide, please. So, Chair, when we look at SAPO's financial performance for the 10 months ending 31st January, the revenue recorded was 2.1 billion rand. And in terms of the revenue was 1.9 billion below budget. And when we compare to the prior year, the revenue had declined by 694 million or 25%. The main reason for the decline in the revenue is due to decline in the postal services and financial services revenue. When we look at the expenses was 4.3 billion rand. The expenses is below budget by 1.4 billion rand. And we have also seen that the expenses is 682 million lower than the prior year. So as we have seen the decline in revenue, we also seen the decline has been offset slightly by the decline in the expenses, so which resulted in SAPO achieving a 1.7 billion rand loss. So when we look at the prior, this is actually the numbers are correct. So because of the decline in the revenue, we managed to reduce expenses. So when we compare to the loss for the period, the loss is exactly as the previous period. So there's not been a worsening in the position of the loss position. Thank you, Kiet. Next slide, please. The next slide just depicts the breakdown of the revenue. We can still see postal services makes up 54% of the revenue at 1.1 billion rand. So the total of 2.1 billion rand revenue, postal services makes up 54% of 1.1 billion. SASSA revenue of 299 million rand or 14%, and financial services 403 million rand. The main contributor for the financial services revenue is the motor vehicle licensing revenue, and courier business was 29 million rand or 1%. Thank you, Kier. Next slide, please. When we look at SAPO's total expenses for the 10 months ending 31st January, the total expenses was 4.3 billion rand. The primary cost driver is staff expenses. So we can see staff expenses is 2.9 billion rand or contribute 69% to SAPO's total expenses. In terms of security expenses is 7% or 315 million rand, and property expenses 392 million rand, 9%, and transport costs 101 million rand, and IT expenditure 231 million rand. So these are the 5 primary cost drivers of SAPO. Thank you, Kier. Next slide, please. When we look at SAPO's cash flow position and sustainability, the implementation of the SAPO strategy becomes crucial to implement the strategy, ensure the revenue and expenditure initiatives are achieved to ensure that we improve the financial performance and operational performance of SAPO. So when we look at SAPO's cash flow position for the 10 months, and coming on the backdrop of the previous financial year where the loss position was 2.1 billion rand, we can see for the 10-month loss has continued with a 1.7 billion rand loss. And that has continued to place pressure on SAPO's cash flow position, once again, as expenses continue to exceed the revenue. But when we look at our expenses as indicated in the previous slide, the expenses has been managed and due to the cost containment measures. And once again, we can see that by management of the SAPO's cost, we have maintained the same loss position for the previous year because expenses has declined by 682 million rand for the 10 months period ending 31st January. When we look at the trade and non-trade liabilities as of 31st January, this is the cumulative balance. So SAPO's liabilities is 5.4 billion rand as of 31st January 2023. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kirt.
Thank you, Chair. We will now be moving on to the measures to address the going concern. And as indicated, the turnaround strategy that was developed in October 2021 in conjunction with DCDT, funding until very recently, last week, when we were advised that we would be receiving a 2.4 billion rand allocation. The turnaround strategy necessarily has remained unfunded. Now, the funding for that would be a point for critical strategic projects, unnecessarily for capital investment and certain operational expenditure to implement the turnaround strategy. Now, unfortunately, we have not been exempt from load shedding, and necessarily the load shedding or the continued load shedding has affected us operationally in terms of service delivery standards, but necessarily also in terms of revenue generation. Most of our post offices are not equipped with generators unless they are situated within a shopping center, where we may have a generator, but necessarily that affects us as well. If one then just looks at what we've done in terms of addressing the going concern, we have divided that into cost containment and then necessarily revenue generation. And we will then just quickly go on to that. Now, as part of the strategy, we were considering or looking at the creation of employee-owned companies, where we were targeting 3,000 employees in the 2022-23 financial year. We have been working towards that, and we have necessarily also then adopted and worked towards the owner-driver scheme. We are implementing that at this point in time. We have had engagements with organized labor specifically to discuss salary reductions, a reduced work week, voluntary severance packages, which we have already implemented. And we will then just quickly look on the following slide in terms of the employees that have opted for the VSPs, and then also discussions regarding a retrenchment process or a Section 189, and then medical aid benefits. If one then just, in terms of the voluntary severance package, during February 2022 and March 22, 668 employees were granted VSP and left the organization. And then a further 385 applied, but however, at the time, funding was not available, so that was halted due to the funding constraints. And then during November and December, a further 1,071 applications were approved, and the employees left the organization on the 31st of January 2023. What we've also been doing is the staff verification to ensure that we do not have ghost employees, and this has been completed. But at the same time, also working towards reduction of our post-retirement medical aid liabilities, and the buyout process on that has commenced. Also, we have had a moratorium on appointment of staff, with the exception of very critical positions. You will be aware that we've just recently appointed CFO. She will be joining, and she's obviously one of those critical appointments. But also at the same time, staff acting in higher positions, that acting allowance was removed during 2021, and also the removal of cell phone allowances during October 2022. Also, we've been working very much towards reducing the reduction in security costs. That's necessary guarding, and specifically also the guarding and the CIT costs when one looks at the pay points, SASA pay points, which are costs were quite high, and necessarily this contract has now been taken over by Postbank. Also, procurement's been restricted to essential and emergency situations, and we've been working towards reducing the cost, or at the same time increasing income for all non-profitable outlets in the region. When we discuss the branch outlets, we will then necessarily give an indication of what our branch profile looks at in terms of profitable and non-profitable. But at the same time, also then looking at the rationalization of high-cost outlets, looking at the renting of vacant space. And at this point, all cleaning contracts have been cancelled, and all cleaning is now done by the South African Post Office staff. In terms of revenue generation, we will then quickly, we have a slide on the Post Office strategy. Members who are not so well versed in terms of the Post Office. But again, one of our key strategic enablers is strategic partnerships, and we are actively pursuing this in the logistics space, looking at the technology, warehousing and infrastructure as a service, also then on financial payments and channels and platforms, authentication authority, which speaks to our trust center, and then also where we have property that we can develop, let, manage and sell. We are in the process of that. And then necessarily the funding for the employee-owned companies with reference to the owner-driver scheme. We've been in discussions with CIFA, CEDA, and of late with Productivity SA to get the initiative off the ground. Also, again, we are working towards the online MVL. We've recently launched the registered email and SMS, working towards confidential email and SMS, and then also our e-commerce partners, where we have integrated with Fish, ICE, Spinny Express, Mail America's, Signature Mail. Again, one of our key strategic revenue pillars in terms of strategy would be the establishment of e-commerce mall, and that is also in process. In terms of, again, revenue generation, we have necessarily rolled out necessary integration capabilities for e-commerce with the international parcel system, which is done by APIs. We've continued with the distribution of chronic medication. We've continued with the broadcast and digital migration project, distribution of the set-top boxes and the warehousing thereof. Necessarily, whilst the contract is taken over by Postbank, we have to continue to make SASSA payments where beneficiaries come into the branch to collect these payments. Also, in terms of the RTIA, in terms of Constitutional Court's ruling that is expected shortly in terms of the ARSTO, we have consulted with RTIA and also ensured the system's readiness when the system is rolled out. We are currently in discussions with the Department of Home Affairs, specifically with co-location, where we can necessarily get the distribution of ID passport, and also working towards the Department of Transport, where we would launch the driver license pilot program. Again, where possible, we are engaging with COCTA with regards to the municipal statement business. As indicated, we are still quite reliant in terms of our mail business. Mail revenue still comprises 54% of all our revenue. Where possible, we need to grow that as well. But critical to the success of the Post Office of Tomorrow strategy is to look towards government to support the entity, support the post office, which is a state-owned entity. So growth in government business is also essential in our drive towards financial sustainability. Again, also, we have completed and worked towards completing critical business cases in support of the business Post Office of turnaround strategy. Necessarily, the funding issue has been a problem. So we have started looking at other avenues of generating revenue, so where we would necessarily look at a revenue share basis, again, which would then fall into the strategic partnerships area. So we have been working towards that. Just to quickly to rebrief the members, just in terms of what the Post Office of Tomorrow strategy comprises, you'll note that we have 5 revenue pillars, where we're really looking at re-establishing Post Office as a leading logistics service provider in South Africa, and necessarily where we would be looking at forwards and backwards integration with logistics companies and making our infrastructure available in the first mile and necessarily also in the last mile. Necessarily, we are unable to do this unless we go in some form of logistics partnership. A lot of the logistics companies within South Africa have access to international funding, and necessarily the exchange rate is also in their favor. So where we would be looking at growing logistics partnerships, we have been working with a number of those, some of them on an international basis, and we are proceeding with them. Then in terms of the e-commerce hub, there were some technical issues, and we have previously worked on this. These have now been resolved. And again, we are looking at creating the e-commerce platform to then necessarily generate additional revenue and work for the post office in terms of our logistics capabilities. And then if one looks at the 4th revenue pillar, is the Authentication Authority, or really what we call the Trust Center, where we, in terms of the Electronic Communication Act, we are the preferred provider of electronic signatures. and we are again, not re-establishing, it's already in existence. We are wanting to expand and strengthen our capability in that. And also in terms of the digital business hubs, which serves the needs of communities in terms of availability to infrastructure for digital business as photocopiers, faxes, availability of network. So then necessarily assisting the Department of Communications in also bringing communication facilities through to the underserved communities. Now, necessarily, we cannot do this, achieve these revenue pillars, unless we look towards building a capacity within the organization to deliver on our promises and what we need to do, and then necessarily also that capability. What we need to do to be able to bring that capacity and capability to the market, we need to modernize and digitalize. Most of our infrastructure is very old. Our software is very old. Our points of sale are very old. So when we look at the modernization and digitalization, there are some key projects that we've identified that need to be funded and then need to be implemented so that we can modernize and digitalize. And one of them would necessarily be our data center, which is in Seven Church, a number of other projects which we have been working towards. Now, necessarily to be able to build the capacity and the capability and to modernize and digitalize, if the post office were to do it itself, it would take a lot longer. And in many instances, we have seen that the post office is always not great at implementing where it goes when it does it going alone. So again, the strategic partnerships are a strategic enabler to our strategy. And again, as indicated, we are working towards that. But at the same time, we need to take our employees along with that as well. And then necessarily the necessary upskilling, reskilling, and the cross-skilling of employees and making sure that they are compliant and they can meet the requirements of the Post Office of Tomorrow strategy. Bearing in mind that there may be a need, or there is a need, that we may need to shed some of those employees. Now, when we crafted our annual performance plan, we will go through that on the next slide. You will see that we've really mirrored the Post Office of Tomorrow strategy in terms of what we are measuring. So again, financial sustainability is a key strategic outcome of the Post Office of Tomorrow strategy. So what we've then said is, the request was that we indicate how far we've come with the implementation of the Post Office of Tomorrow strategy. And then we're of the opinion that what we will do is we will provide our performance plan, which is necessarily an indication of where we are in terms of implementing the strategy. As indicated, we've mirrored, the APP has mirrored the strategy in itself, and we have set KPIs. So overall, at this point in time, our performance is not great. The projected performance for the year is a 23% attainment on the KPIs, but one has to bear in mind that many of these, for example, if one looks at the building, the capacity and the capability. Now, there is the achievement of the regulated mail standard, which is regulated in terms of ICASA, in terms of which we need to maintain that delivery standard. This necessarily is impacted by a number of aspects. A lot of our branches are closed due to the non-payment of rental, and necessarily whatever is housed within that branch, including mail, is then stuck within there. Again, also our fleet, we've had to reduce the fleet, which necessarily impacts on the delivery standard, and necessarily that also then is impacted by the financial or the non-availability of finance. So overall, in terms of the implementation of the Post Office of Tomorrow strategy, we have not progressed very well, which is not to say that we are unable to implement the strategy of the Post Office of Tomorrow strategy. We are very heartened. There was a study requested by the DCDT, which was the Postal Market Survey study, completed by a company called Letsema. We were fortunate enough to have a presentation done by Letsema Friday last week. And we are heartened by the fact that the study in itself found that strategy that we are implementing is sound, and it is the direction that we need. So we are confident with the funding allocation that has been made available. And the 2.4 billion rand, that we will be able to proceed going forward to start implementing parts, if not all, of the Post Office of Tomorrow strategy. Now, there was also a request in terms of the operations of the branch outlets. So if I can just quickly show you here, you'll note that we have 1,183 branches currently in the country, which is necessarily broken down into the province on the left-hand side, the post offices, which is a conventional branch. A post point is where we are located within a store, like a spa or something like that. We have 34 of those. And then transportables would necessarily be very much like those containers where we have then fitted out a post office. We still have 15 of those. And then in terms of mobiles, where we have mobile post office, they are fitted within a vehicle. They have 2 counters and they have the necessary connectivity to perform all transactions. Necessarily, the security of these is not the best. So we would necessarily then only deploy these mobile branches in urgent situations. Then also we have 374 what we call the retail postal agencies. It's a smaller version of what we call a post point, and we have 304 of those. If one then looks in terms of total arrears, rental arrears at this point in time that we have, is we've got 338.2 million rand owed in arrear rentals. And of that, you have then necessarily received a priority list for payment where there are various actions that have been implemented by the landlords. So either we have been locked or we will be locked out. There's 105 of those. We have 22 branches where the electricity has been cut, and then necessarily we are unable to transact. We have 341 where we have received summons, legal action. And legal action will include necessarily cancellation of the lease. And then also we've got the threaten to lock, and then electricity cut or cancel, we've got 100. So of the 1,183 branches, we have 571 branches which are at risk, if I can call it that, due to the availability of funding and necessarily our expenses far exceeding our revenue that is going to be generated. Now, in terms of the branch closures that we've had from 1 April 2022, there have been 92. Of those, 50 have been forced closures or evictions by the landlords. And then we've had relocations, we relocated the branch. But also there's been a process of where we really look at the efficiency of our network. And we looked at 41 of those branches were closed through a process of amalgamation, we call, where we then necessarily amalgamate that branch with a closely situated branch. And we have 41 of those. If one looks at the property estate, we have 643 company-owned buildings, of which 207 are leased out, and that then speaks our wanting to increase the rental income through our addressing the going concern. Then, in terms of our operational branches, there's a bit of a mismatch between the 1,122 and the 183. My apologies for that. But of our rural branches, we have 457 rural branches, of which 393 are loss-making. So we only have 64 or 14% of our rural branches which are profitable. We have 665 urban branches, which that constitutes 9% of our total branches. And of that, 80% of 552 branches are loss-making. And that necessarily means that our profitable branches are 133, or only 20% of our branches. I will not touch on consequent management, that will be discussed by the department. In terms of there was then also a request that we address the cases reported and arrests. So during the period and to date, as at the 31st of January, we had 860 incidents reported to SAPS, of which 130, there were 130 arrests that took place. You will note that there's a murder indicated as one, and that murder charge relates to a security guard murdered during an armed robbery at the Siki branch in the Eastern Cape on 4th of April 2022 whilst he was on duty. So It is unfortunate that we do have to deal with these incidents, but unfortunately, the Post Office is still viewed as a soft target. And then in terms of the classification of incidents, we've broken that down. Burglary, credit and SASSA acts, fraud, murder, property damage, robbery, sexual assault, and necessary theft. So, Chair, thank you very much. In short, that was the presentation from the Post. Thank you.
Take it that honorable members, you would have noted, you'll note your questions. And I would want us to, Deputy Minister, I'm not sure how you've arranged that we'll probably get to the Postbank just to have fuller sense of that. I think it will help members to also compare. on the virtual platform are still following us. Yes, you can proceed. I get the Sentech CEO, Deputy Minister. Okay. Mr. Boy. And then proceed to present the measure. The boy, are you on the platform? Okay, let's allow Mr. Boy to reconnect.
I'm not sure if I am audible. I've had challenges with the audio. Chairperson, apologies.
Yes, we can hear you.
For the last 3 minutes, I didn't hear the question raised that I need to attend to. I must apologize.
Mr. Boy, you are expected to lead the presentation on the BBI Sentech.
Okay, all right. No, thank you. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Yes, I think for us, as good morning to members and to you, Honorable Chair, and to the colleagues on the platform. I would like to start by saying that we were requested to give an update on where we are in as far as the measure with the BBI, which has now become an acquisition of BBI by Sentech. The process, Chairperson, has gone to a point where we have submitted all the required documents to the shareholder, and we are currently waiting for a final sign-off from the Minister on the sale of share agreement and an engagement on the due diligence. And also we have been engaging with BBI together as the two companies to develop a turnaround plan for BBI, which is what was requested by our respective boards and the Minister who's responsible for these two entities. So in terms of the update, Chairperson, we are targeting that at the end of this financial year, or by the end of this financial year, we would have all the signed agreements.
So up to you, Mr. Boy. I'm not sure if those on the virtual may be experiencing what we're experiencing in terms of sharing. We hear you speaking, but
recording in progress.
So please, if you can just share, so that as you summarize your points, they can follow.
Chairperson, if I may ask Mr. Shelembe to share that document on his side, I'm unable to share it from this phone that I'm using now, because I've got connectivity challenges here with my laptop. It was simply a brief summary, Chairperson, that we did not think that it was necessary to present or to send a full on PowerPoint presentation. We send the report to the department. I think maybe they can share that with the committee. I hope I'm still audible.
I just check if there's any assistance in this regard. I think for those of us who are physically here, we do have the report. So we're just making it a point that those that make on virtual can be able to follow.
Can I please be assisted by IT to just go through that?
And then Nigeria working on that.
Thank you very much.
Take it now, see it from that side of virtual.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for assisting me there.
Okay, so you can then indicate which slide you're getting to, then they'll be able to assist.
Yes, Chair, I was doing the summary. If you look at that slide, which shows table of contents, which is what we have given as a background and the roadmap for the acquisition of broadband in Bako. I hope you can see that slide number 4, where we're showing the background to what has been happening, and also on the right-hand side of that slide, we're giving the progress report. I've summarized this, Chairperson, and indicating to the members, honorable members, that we have, if you go to the next slide, I think skip this one, go to the next one, where I can give a progress report on where we are in terms of the activities. We have covered, yes, thank you, that one. We have covered a lot of ground, and the due diligence report, as I said, and the final sale of share agreement is now with the shareholder. And we are waiting confidently that we will receive an approval for what we have requested. And by the end of this financial year, we should be in a position to execute. And as I was indicating, that what really is outstanding now in terms of the pending progress is the signing of the document, the notifications or PFMA notifications, which will happen post the signing of the document, and also the informing of the the Competition Commission, which will then lead to us executing the acquisition, depending on all the conditions which we have on slide number 6, the conditions which we have placed to the company that is being acquired on the due diligence report. These conditions are still being discussed between ourselves and the department. But the target is to complete the sign-off by the end of the financial year, and then the execution of the integration should then begin in the next financial year, Chairperson. So on that point, I would like to say progress is being made. It is really, I think, something critical for us to complete as soon as possible, because we are very basically suffering because people are moving out of the organization because of uncertainty. But we're confident that we'll arrest all that and manage to get the organization back on track. Thank you, Chair. I will pause on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boy. On behalf of Sentech, maybe let's get back to the point you said would make an assessment on. Honorable members, I would want to guide that if you look at the presentations that would have processed, these would have been your major presentations. For the other presentations, it's really 1 or 2 points to raise. So instead of
Recording in progress.
That discussion, maybe let's allow them to complete, but the department later, so that we allow a discussion. I'm trying to balance all views in that scope, so that we're productive also in engagement. That it's not just about presentations because we process them, but like I said, the remaining presentations, Deputy Minister, except for what you'll call the consolidated from the department, are just a few minutes. And just after that, we then get to the engagement, and then the department can engage separate from the entities. So that's what I would want to guide honorable members on, given all the glitches we continue to have on these 2 platforms. So we can then get the remaining ones, which would be the MESA, the SITA, the SUSASA. So those would be like a few minutes presentations, unless the presentation I've left out, the SABC. Yes. So we can take those. There would be more of a few minutes because we have engaged even matters that relates to material irregularities in the previous meeting. So just take us to the key points. Thereafter, we get an engagement before we get to talk to the department. Can we do that, TM, guided by yourself?
Greetings, Chairperson. It's Nico from Nemisa.
Nico.
I'm getting a lot of feedback. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to quickly try and summarize then the issues emanating from the entities that have not presented, but maybe because we have the SAPC here on my left, we will allow them to present on their issues. To start off with, on measures to address going concerns in the portfolio, going concern issues really pertain to entities that are regarded as business enterprises and therefore do not cover the entire span of our entities in the portfolio. The affected, oops. I've lost power. But I think we're still working this one. No, the lights are on.
It's disconnected.
Okay. It's fine. We do not know if this will be so we'll have a discussion with
Smart card is working here. So it's the system. The system with the microphones has died.
You see this section with the speakers list. So then let's increase this to 7.
Never again, we have a hard room. Everybody in this room, not this room, ever. Another room.
The mics are back. Yeah, the mics are back. Yes. Yeah. So I was saying the going concern issues affected the business enterprises in the portfolio. In the main, the affected entities with going concern issues are the SAPC, the post office, which has made a presentation on this, and BBI. These are the 3 entities that are affected. Postbank has also presented on the going concern issue, but not because they are having financial issues that brings to the fore the going concern consideration, but rather because of the variation notice that was raised by the Postbank. Postbank has also presented on that. So I am going to skip the SAPC input because they are here to make that input. The post office has also presented on the going concern and the measures they are taking to deal with that, as well as Postbank. So I would go to then issues relating to consequence management in the portfolio. With respect to consequence management, we are saying the complex nature of accountability chain of SOEs or state-owned entities needs to be explained prior to an outline of a consequence management framework. It involves, there is the accountability chain. It involves the SOE management, boards, auditors, executive authority, which is the minister, and the portfolio committee representing Parliament. These oversight bodies fulfill different oversight functions in accordance with their specific mandate. Then we spell out the huge role of the executive authority in terms of oversight,
And we're saying that is derived in the main from the PFMA, Treasury regulations, the Companies Act, and the founding legislation of these entities. We have a branch in the department which I head that is responsible for oversight of these SOEs and assist the minister to provide oversight in her capacity as a shareholder representative of the SOEs. As part of managing consequence management, entities are required to submit audit plans, which we monitor. We then make recommendations for expeditious resolutions of the AGSA findings through the development of concrete action plans, advising boards of entities to institute aggressive measures and consequence management to address the continuous occurrence of irregular expenditure and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. The department executes its oversight responsibility over SOEs through the shareholders' compacts and governance agreements. Concerning governance, consequence management is provided for through clauses that make it mandatory for SOE boards to proactively monitor action plans for implementation of Auditor-General and internal audit recommendations to effectively address audit findings and unauthorized, irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. I'm now going to go into specific entities with matters relating to consequence and management. With respect to the post office, for each instance of irregular expenditure, a consequence management assessment certificate is to be completed and submitted to the Financial Misconduct Committee for evaluation and determination of any further action that may be required, including consequence management. Following the submission of condonation applications and in order to comply with the requirements of National Treasury, a process has commenced whereby all CMACs, the certificates received from 2016 onwards, are in the process of review. Condonation by National Treasury can only be done after the consequence management process has been completed. The revised condonation applications are to be submitted to National Treasury. 81 instances have been recommended by the Financial Misconduct Committee for the implementation of consequence management, and the process is underway. With respect to Postbank, I think Postbank has spoken about the 277 million reported as irregular expenditure to date, of which the 121 was paid to one supplier. So I'm going to skip Postbank. NEMISA, the status of implementing consequence management at NEMISA is provided as below. There is irregular expenditure of in excess of 41 million, of which the then CEO was responsible. The consequence management was implemented. The then CEO was summoned to the disciplinary hearing, but resigned prior to the disciplinary processes having started. There's another case of 3.8 million for the year 2018. The then CEO and the procurement manager were the responsible persons. And yes, there was consequence management. The procurement manager was taken to a disciplinary hearing and dismissed. The then CEO taken to a disciplinary hearing, but later resigned. Another case of 19.5 million for NEMISA for the year 2017. Again, the responsible person was the then procurement manager. Consequence management was done. The procurement manager was taken to a disciplinary hearing and dismissed. There is a case of 65,000 for the year 2022, for which the procurement manager, the current procurement manager in this instance, is involved, and there's consequence management underway. In fact, a warning has been issued, and the 17,000 odd will be recovered from the procurement manager. Acknowledgement of debt has been signed. There's another case of 275,000 involving the human resource manager, in which a warning has been issued to the human resource manager. And there is another case where there has not yet been consequence management of 333,000. It's still under investigation. Investigation is still underway here. There's a matter of 1.4 million relating to the landlord. There is no consequence management applicable here. This was caused by NEMISA's employees who had left the organization at the time of identifying the matter. So NEMISA is in the process of recovering the money from the landlord. And finally, there is a matter of 110,000, which is not yet under investigation, and investigation is soon to be underway. With respect to USASA, 6 employees were suspended, and the investigation report for the suspended employees was issued in July 2022. USASA appointed the investigator and the chairperson of the disciplinary hearing from the DPSA at no cost. 4 of the 6 employees approached the Labour Court on an urgent basis to challenge the investigation report. This matter was dismissed with cause. The disciplinary proceedings against 6 employees are now underway, and it is anticipated that they will be concluded by the end of the first quarter of 2023-24 financial year. In the board office, the company secretary was placed on precautionary suspension in September 2022, pending an investigation into allegations of misconduct. The hearing is to commence now in February 2023, and it is anticipated that the matter will be concluded at the end of the first quarter of 2023-2024 financial year. If I move on to SETA, there were 10 instances where consequence management was not implemented. The reasons are the resignation of implicated employees prior to taking action, and investigations not yet finalized. There were 18 instances where consequence management was implemented, and the written warning was issued in each case. And there's a chart here that shows areas where consequence management was implemented by SETA. They relate to irregular expenditure, highest bidder not awarded the tender, missing SBD standard bidding forms, and not following SCM processes, and theft of SETA's laptops. Those were the categories of the misconducts. Consequence management at the SABC, I'm going to leave this to the CFO as well, who is here. I think that is all the entities, Chair. They are also available on the platform to make input where I have missed out certain aspects. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members. I hope you can hear me. Chair, can you hear me? Thank you very much. We will really get into the SABC's presentation on the going concern. But I thought before the CFO can present the few slides that would like to share with the committee at a high level, I just need to highlight a few things, and it'll actually give the required context for the few slides that we'll share with the committee. Firstly, you will notice that as the SABC, we are in the middle of a perfect storm at various levels. One, the Broadcast Research Council of South Africa has shown a severe decline when it comes to the audience ratings of the SABC. And the TV Trends audience that have been shared are largely influenced by two things. The power blackouts that are occasioned by load shedding. And these have really left television screens across the country lifeless. Essentially, it means that all our advertisers and clients are not able to get the required airtime that they pay for. Subsequently, this does affect the revenue generation element. The second thing is that the digital migration process has affected us quite severely from an audience rating point of view. As members know, there is a close correlation between audience ratings as well as the revenue that is supposed to be generated. Put that aside, if you look at the governance issues, you all know that we do not have a board. All of the revenue generation plans that we should have implemented have not been approved. We have approved them at EXCO in line with the delegation of authority framework, but these do require the approval from the board. Thus, those plans have now been stalled, and we will only be able to do that once we have a board that is appointed. I do need to indicate that these are not just historic, but these also look forward, because by now we would have wanted to ensure that we are in the implementation phase of those plans. And lastly, Chair, as I hand over to Yolandi, I do think that it is important that we contextualize our going concern within those constraints. Thank you very much. Yolandi?
I don't seem to be able to find it.
Chair.
Okay. We have not yet identified instances of fraud and theft, and will pursue them in terms of the relevant regulation and legislation at the time. And then recoveries that have been identified and will still be identified will also be proceeded on according to our policies and procedures. And then I just speak about the period before 2018 and initiatives ongoing around investigations and consequence management. And that is that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. In listening to the presentations, we would now go to engagements, and I want to start by checking on the virtual platform.
My apologies, Chair.
And that if there are those that would want to ask questions, maybe I start there. But if there are no hands, I then come to M201.
My apologies, Chair, is Honorable Gubega.
Want to put up questions on the presentations?
Chair, before you can take the hands.
I note your hand. I will come to this side just to note hands. I note Honorable Machosi, Honorable Kolaband, Kodwadani, Honorable Lala, in that order. And I tell you, Honorable, okay, I didn't see her hand when I started with Honorable Machos. So you indeed come in just before I get to Honorable Kolaband. And then Honorable Lala plus. Can we start with Honorable Kubega? Please proceed.
My apologies, Chair. I wanted just to take note that the presentation of SABC, I couldn't hear anything because I was off. Actually, in the meeting, I was just listening, but there was nothing that comes forth. So I wanted just to note you to say I couldn't hear anything on the side of the SABC. Then I will come after on the other presentation where I wanted to ask some questions, Chair. But I couldn't hear anything on the side of the SABC because the screen was just off.
I apologize for that, but we had asked that the presentation should be shared with the members. But if you have questions on the other entities, can proceed to ask those, and then we get to the other members who are here. We do so because of the connectivity problem we have, so that we don't lose inputs that we want to.
Chair, they can continue. I'll come after, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, can we then proceed to the Honorable Machos?
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, and the DM and all entities that are present. Firstly, maybe let us appreciate the presentations that we have received thus far, and maybe to raise a few points, Chairperson, especially in terms of the post office. While we're receiving the presentation, and I've noted that we've got, and it's something that I've always raised, I don't know how we can come to it that we have staff cost of 69% of all the budget of the post office, which then becomes a serious concern for us that what are the mitigations in between that we try to reduce the staff cost of the post office and also the expenses of the post office. What have you gone through the skills audit in finding maybe what are the capabilities or the capacity that you need in the post office, so that we know that these are the credentials that you need and what type of staff that you have. And in terms of the VSP, how is it going to affect your next financial year? Because I know that when people are taking VSPs, then there will be costs that will be incurred. And I did not get that of how much are we looking at in terms of the VSP. But also on the offices that the post office has. In KZN, you only have 144, which I would think that then, which means we do not reach as many people as we should be as the post office, because there are people in the deep rural areas in Eldlebe, which means they will have to access the post office going to Ulundi, which will be a financial cost for them. How then have you, maybe in those areas where you do not have post office, how have you seen, because I only see that you've got only 2 mobile offices that you have provided for the whole of KZN, of which I do not think that that it is sufficient enough to do so. Your projections, I'm very, very worried about your projections, which takes us to 2026, showing that we will not be on our feet, we will not have a financial sustainability within now up until 2026. Then it really raises a lot of concerns. I'm sure if you can take us through of what measures have you put in place to make sure that maybe we find other ways of finding our feet within the post office. And also I take note and compliment the fact that you have went as far as engaging other departments that you would work with them, especially if now you are getting into distribution of municipal statements. But also, how is your relationship with Home Affairs and Transport Department in of the releasing of IDs and licenses and so forth? So I would really want to be taken into confidence with that chairperson to make sure that we are on the same page. On the Postbank, I see that we've got an irregular balance of 277 million, footness of 84. It really raises a lot of concerns, chairperson, and it doesn't take away the fact that already I have I do have that while we had these 2 entities together, it was not performing. Now we are trying to separate the 2 entities, and I'm not seeing any change. I would want to be convinced more in terms of the Postbank, but I'm not seeing any change at all. And also the Postbank speaks of the audit findings report, but I don't see any timeframes here. That in their mitigations and making sure that they align themselves with what the Auditor-General has requested. I don't see that they've listed that in so and so time would have tried to maybe solve this one in so and so time. So I only see what the audit findings are, but I don't see any status that says these timeframes were putting for us to solve all the concerns that were raised by the AG. With the other ones, Chairperson, I would let me go straight to SAPC. The findings of 2.1 million under investigation, for how long? What are the timeframes as well? Would like to get that. The 1.6 billion irregular under assessment is under assessment for how long, and what is happening, the consequence management thereof. What are your what have you followed so far, so that we understand if you are doing something and then we follow through that. In the whole department, Chairperson, obviously the status quo, it tells you that if you only achieve 19% of your KPIs, which means your entities are not performing at all. I seriously have a problem that we have only 29% achieved out of the 100, which gives us a big problem. Again, what I want to bring to attention at DM is the fact that how do we deal with these things in terms of government? I think we must come up with a policy, because we cannot have CEOs that will resign after having a 41 million irregular expenditure and not being able to tell us what has happened, and they take an option of resigning, knowing that after resigning, there is no consequence management that will come after them. Then it becomes a huge problem with the government entities, because we are setting ourselves for failure. We have these CEOs that are running the entities. They do all these shenanigans. I mean, there's a theft of laptops and so forth. And at some point in time, as the government, I think we must come up with a policy that says, even if you would resign, we must go after you and we must retain at least some of the money that, because it doesn't happen that they didn't follow due process. They know that they should follow due process, but for the mere fact that it's not happening, it is because of all these shenanigans that they do in these entities. And when you come to us as the committee, we find that these entities are not performing well due to the people that are put as senior managers in those entities. I'm not sure. We must have a serious discussion about that. We must have stringent policies that are put in place to make sure that everyone takes accountability for everything that happened under their watch. It can't go as willy-nilly that a person knows that I can spend 600 billion or 600 million in that entity, and when I have to account for 400 million, I'll just resign. Where is that 400 million went to? We must find out where it went to, and then if there is any lead that those people were involved in that fund, we must try and retain some of the funds from them. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Honorable.
still
SAPO employee has been using their laptop for over 10 years, and I speak under correction. And there's no synergy there for me. How are we going to correct these things? And I still, when I do see the post office guy delivering my municipal bill, it's on a bicycle. Is this what we are taking into the future? I know there's carbon emission issues, but that's my question. We are talking about reducement and security while we are reporting 451 million in Lagos. And we are setting ourselves up for failure if we are still going to talk about fraud because of archaic IT systems. And then we are only saying 6% or the chairperson makes a cross report about basic training and provisional liquidation of the post office. How legitimate is that document and what does it mean? It's a high cost, and I think it's dated the 9th of February. How legitimate is that cost document and what its it's second round.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Chairperson, I think my colleagues have raised a number of issues and focus on those that they did not raise. The first one is now that you have got an injection of 2.4 billion, and in this instance, I don't think the response should be that we are waiting for Treasury to give us preconditions, because your mere submission of the Post Office of Tomorrow strategy, for me, was a precondition for the 2.4 billion. So my question would be, now that this 2.4 billion is meant for the Post Office of Tomorrow, you are sitting at an expenditure that is almost 50% above your revenue. How are you going to manage that situation? Are you going to leave this one, implement? How are you going to implement the strategy under those circumstances? I'm just citing that as an example. But I will not go into the details because of time. The second issue that I wanted to raise was partly raised by my colleague, but I want to raise it differently. It's the issue of closing down of the post offices. I think the Honorable has touched on that. It's quite close to my heart. That when you lose almost 50 outlets, have you done the risk assessment in terms of community service as it relates to the closure of those post offices? I understand you don't have money to pay these challenges, financial challenges. I do understand that. But in as much as you closing offices, have you done the sort of an impact analysis after you closing these 50 offices? What was the impact on our communities in that regard? Maybe if you could respond to that. The other issue that I wanted to raise, this one was raised by Matheus, but I'll raise it when I speak to Nemisa. I'm still on the post office. The other issue that I wanted to raise was around in your presentation, measures to addressing the going concern. You raised two important issues: cost containment, which for me is not very clear. At some point, the CEO was on TV talking about Section 189. At some point, there's VSP. there's these other processes. Maybe my question would be, can you just in summary give us that rationalization plan so that we understand? It must not just be rationalization in a broad sense. At least we must have an understanding. I see here the detailed options that you are considering, but you are not saying definitely this option, for instance, the timeline is this one. These people are not resigning by this period. We're moving to this one. This one does not work by this period. So this process ultimately should be completed by this period. Maybe this, I'm just trying to help so that when you respond, at least you understand my question. And then maybe the last question was just and maybe this one of my colleagues asked this question. The reduction to security costs. Maybe if you could clarify, because as in employees, security personnel, as in your strategies around how we show the post office in terms of the money that we spend, in terms of investigations, because security is just a broad concept. So if you could clarify, because I am unable to ask questions because you're just saying the reduction of security costs. I don't know what it means. Maybe if you could clarify that, I would further come back. And then with regard to the SABC, maybe let me start with Sentech. I mentioned they've presented, Sentech has presented a report. But I'm worried there's an area where about 4 or 5 times they mentioned the minister there, the outstanding issue minister. Outstanding issue minister. And there's no clarity. Maybe if you could give us a highlight, because if the process is stalled in the office of the ministry, surely there should be some form of timeline. When are these things going to be done so that we are clear the measure is completed by this period? At least one of the things that Sentech should respond to, because they can't always say we are waiting for the minister. They should be saying to us by this period we expect to have finalized the measure. Because I'm sure it's almost 2 years now we're talking about the measure. So it should be completed. So at least if they say by end of this financial year, or possibly by the next financial year, at least we know we're working on something. But I want us to understand what is this thing that is outstanding with the minister. Can it be clarified so that we can have a way forward? SABC, I'm worried SABC, and I've always been worried about SABC because I love the SABC more than anything. And that's why I'm always working hard on SABC. And I'm still going to continue to be hard on it. Not that I hate it. But I think you presented an irregular expenditure of a period of 5 financial years, which for me is a bit tricky. Because you are saying to us, this has been there for you know by the first financial year that you know by the first. So if you present the regular expenditure, you do it as if you have the age, so that you know for this financial year, this is what you are carrying. So you are carrying and the regular expenditure from this financial year is this much. And since then, you have not had the regular expenditure. But if you just put it for 5 years, it's a bit tricky. You're a bit smart, but it is smart. you need to clarify yourself. You know exactly where are you standing in terms of what you left. Is it the 5-year thing? It started when, because each and every financial year should have its own irregular expenditure if there is. So that's the first one. Secondly, I wish the CEO was here. Because the last time we persuaded Treasury to keep the bailout was on the basis that you're going to turn around the SABC. And where was the SABC is going? It has been going down, if you like. I don't want to get everything. Been going down in terms of revenue generation and code and go on and on. And the excuse has always been COVID. Now it's not COVID, it's load shedding. Next year it will be another excuse. So from where I'm sitting, I think you have not fulfilled that part. That the portfolio committee, because part of our conditions, not the treasury condition, part of our condition is the committee was that we are going to persuade treasury to help you because we don't want the SABC to collapse. And you assured us that over a period of 3 financial years, we should have turned the SABC around. I was still in this committee, I still remember why. Now, where we're sitting, I don't want to get into the details of the 8.6 people under investigation. So the second part is that at that time there was an issue about the previous SABC. I don't want to get into the housing training and cohorts. I don't want to get into that. I asked you a question, which the many colleagues felt that was unfair, but I think I should ask you again. If you pursue a criminal investigation of fraud, you're pursuing a fraud of 1 million, but you are spending almost 7 million. Does it make sense? Almost 7 million. If I ask you how much have you spent on those investigations, just the investigation, court cases and so on. Because we need to balance as much as we are fighting corruption, but we can't just spend more money on a case and then we don't get more money from that case because it's equally futile from where I'm sitting. Maybe in future, or if you have figures now, please indicate to me how much was spent just on pursuing legal cases. Because the last time we were fighting about your legal unit spending a lot of money. Maybe if you can clarify that. I'm through with SABC. I think Chairperson, with regards to NEMISA, I think my colleagues have taken all the questions I had. I think okay here, yeah. And then there was SASA. Yeah, sorry, Chair. My hand was yeah, no. Yeah, thanks, Chair. Let me pause here so that I don't waste time. I'm not confused. You're using the incorrect words. No, I've noted some.
That's honorable. I can check the
Chair? Oh. Chair, can you hear me? It seems as if my network is not okay. Chair? Chair? Hajira, can you hear me?
We do hear you.
Chair can hear you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Let me first greet all the members and the officials who are present in the meeting today. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Let me greet all the members and the officials who are present, and also let me acknowledge all the presentations that they have made today, Chair. Mine is only one question, especially on the side of SAPO. What I would like to know is this one, based on the issue of Section 189, Chair, to say since well they have managed to receive the bailout. Are they going to concentrate on that issue also of Section 189, as they were supposed to retrench the 6,000 people, or are they going to wait for the National Treasury? As the National Treasury, it seems as if it will come with some conditions on that amount that they have managed to give a SAPO. That's the first question. But also I would like to ask on the side of NEMISA, as they were trying to present their consequence management on those issues that they have presented pertaining the issue of the then CFO. What are they going to do since the CFO have resigned? Are they going to continue as they were trying to recover that amount, or are they just going to leave it because now he has resigned? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable surely that they take able to respond. Honorable members, your concern will continue us. We'll make a call later. The CEO was talk to that, and then SMB that is maybe some, and I'm sure the CEO is on the platform, and then some of the questions are give me a also minister. But generally the concern around consequence management, which I think we can take that one. Check.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, Honorable members, Deputy Minister, colleagues as well. SAPO also welcomes the opportunity, as Honorable Borizani indicated, of putting faces to the names and the voices. CEO, I overhear her many times. She would always say something within my earshot, but the chair hates these virtual meetings. May I start by just sharing one or two points which I have premeditated for the presentation. The reason for that is by coincidence they touch on a number of the questions that have been asked. So also maybe in the interest of efficiency, some of the answers can pull from the few points that I had premeditated. And probably they find more relevant now earlier if I would have done so. But may I proceed those with an announcement, which is positive. Mainly that from tomorrow, which is the 1st of March, we will be having a permanent CFO on board, which is something that has been contributing to perhaps not so rosy performance amongst other factors. In the last or one of the preceding portfolio committees, we had indicated that we were in the process of selecting, but we also wanted to take a lesson from previous CFO recruitments, whereby a CFO designated incumbent, in some cases incumbent, will come to SAPO and looking at what is happening, perhaps go back. But in this case, we thought we would do this differently by exposing to the candidates, particularly those that are shortlisted, the actual financial health, so that when they come on board, they are able to already know what to expect. We did take the trouble to do that, and we were quite pleased that the prospective incumbent is eminently qualified for the position and is happy to come on board. And we didn't make that indication on just one occasion. The other point I thought I could make refers to the implementation of the strategy, as indeed it is so formulated in the agenda, with strategy which has been finalized and adopted the cabinet. And towards that end, and this may relate to a question that Honorable Borizani asked, which is what is the core business of the post office. I was going to bring our attention or draw our attention to page 14 of the presentation around turnaround strategy, which looks at the various pillars, which is your logistics center, your logistics partnerships, and then we're going to talk more about
recording stopped
pretty soon. It says recording stopped. Okay. And then e-commerce, and of course the authentication, certificate authentication, and of course the digital business hubs. This has been stated obviously by a
recording in
decreasing
progress
mail centricity, which is not just facing the South African Post Office worldwide. If one goes to Canada, if one goes to the UK, and so on. But the South African Post Office was perhaps quite slow in the uptake to review the situation and prepare itself and find obviously workable solutions. It could be, and somebody could say this quite freely, that a factor has been the fact that it had been run more like a government department from the regular funding, and this has come up now to hit the post office straight in the face and has to look at much more innovative measures. And the partnerships that we're going to talk about will also address that. And then if we're just looking again at that page 14, and just summarizing here, something that was asked around, are you going to wait until, paraphrasing it now, are you going to wait until you have enough capacity? Are you going to have to build enough capacity? Are you going to wait until you modernize? Is the 2.4 billion going to help you there? And so now, that would be what one might term an analog approach. Because if we're going to be looking at those, call them milestones, one stipulation where the post office has built enough capacity and is ready to go. It would be analog, and we are facing now digital modernization. Therefore, partnerships become quite critical. And these are spelled out from pages 12 to 13 in a much more explicit way, but one will not go through that. Where is how far is the implementation of the strategy in relation to those partnerships? Certainly, that is a point that we're happy to answer, particularly when it comes to logistics and courier, but it is also valid to all others. Home Affairs is also one of the departments. There was a question that was asked around that. What is the relationship with Home Affairs and the Department of Transport? But the CEO, I'm sure, will be happy to say more on that. So that is indicating the implementation part, but not around it. There is still some work being done. Some 4 portfolio committees back, we had indicated that much as the implementation of the strategy is predicated on funding, there are also other areas where the strategy can begin to move. As in the case of it's an owner-driver model, because that one doesn't really require, and also insofar as the cleaning services and so on now are in source, but management will indicate more of that. But the contribution would be perhaps minimal at this stage, but I think it is encouraging to staff because the post office doesn't really need to lose out. But we'll come to the assistance we're getting from productivity in South Africa on that. And maybe if we were to stick just on that page 14 where it talks about South African employees. Of course, this is a sore point. And we approached Productivity Institute, and we're waiting for management to report on that, but we're also going to have a board-to-board meeting. But they indicated very interesting interventions that they can help the post office with. For example, the labor activation program. When we met with the unions about a year ago exactly, this was the discussion. The unions asked the post office to approach the Department of Labor to be looking at these issues. Because again, when they are retrenched Department of Labor, there has to be circumspection, I think, for the various reasons indicated. I think Honorable Tembo and others have addressed that point. They've indicated that there is an income supplementary. Yeah, but they would contribute to some of Now, those discussions are very essential because the post office on its own may just look at things in a very channeled way to say that in the strategy that has been adopted, there's a 6,000 number that is indicated there. However, with the assistance from the Department of Labor in particular, which is look at supplementing up to 40% of that. And we're quite happy to share developments as they unfold. So it does become important not to rely only on our capacity to handle that very important project. Insofar as the 2.4 billion that has been only pledged at this moment, it has not yet hit our Honorable Lala, disappointingly, we have to respond and say that conditionality.
Recording stopped.
Shall I say the bureaucracy?
Recording in progress.
The presentation was made, but it was a summarized presentation to the Minister of Finance, and specifically arranged a client of the Post Office between the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Communications, whereby the request was made that we need to understand more deeply, and this is about the time when major developments happen. So we're happy. We live in hope now that it will go a long way towards assisting in the implementation of the strategy, but not only that, but also addressing some other issues. 2.4 billion is only 25% of what was required now. And therefore, there has to be more, but we can never expect that the Treasury can come with that. Therefore, the ball is in our court. And with the trade unions, there is a serious exercise to raise more money. And when the milestone was reached that we put it on, I will leave it to the team. Sorry, I will leave it to the team also to come in. I will try to address questions from Honorable Majority. Quite a number there. Questions from Honorable Bana, particularly around MT. And that 3.4. I will leave the premises of the post office for use by the Postbank and international parcel handling and others as well. At this stage, I'm getting an indication that timing a factor, and I will then pass the ball on to my colleagues.
I just indicate that we still assess the task. Please respond to the questions. I think as we get to the other responses, which will be quite soon, and to take them, we'll make the call. But this is an important aspect of the responses. So CEO, please proceed. I know it's about 10 to 1. So members would still be physical, but those who are would still be able to push out first one and pray for lunch. But let's proceed. But we'll make an assessment because it doesn't mean the conversation has to end. We may have to come back with proper responses as it is. But proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, the Honorable Chair and Honorable members, the BBI and Chair of Entities, my colleagues. Good afternoon. We do indeed appreciate the opportunity to explain ourselves. But I'm going to go just point by point then to the questions as asked. The Honorable Majority asked around issues of staff costs and the reduction from 69%. There's no business that can survive with such high staff costs. So it's important that we deal with those, and hence we have put a number of options to say policies that we could reduce that cost. Under the it would always like. So in fact, to those issues, but the options that we put today, talking to how it is that we reduce staff costs, but also we understand that no business can stay while you're doing staff cost containment, etc. So the focus now moves toward how else can we bring in new revenue. The water skills audit that was done and
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
So behavior of everyone. So we will see the full impact of the implementation by next year. However, everyone the impact is around 24 million. Because the new data are people to and all the statutory, including some impact currently, but it's not a full impact. With the first two offices, with each offices of SAPO, and they are to close offices with our own budget. We can't have 4 post offices in the 5 kilometers here. And largely, we have that because they were in the wall next morning. Are not interrupted. So no one can really ensure that they do the calculation through that. Access to water. It can really making money. The only people making money would be the landlord, but they also not making money because we are paying them. So somebody has to pay more than what also business. That needs to be kind of put on its head because you don't necessarily need the same services in a deep rural area as you do in the office. So the problem that we did was so we are more customer focused now. So that's the kind of thinking that we bring. Also, what is done very recently is the research to the party and recently USO, Universal Service Obligation. We will realize that we need to add more. So we identify the whole this is the same gratuity for under. We know that the department must still do a study, after which it with regards to the strategy itself, it must actually implement because we have approach. Also, we don't think that very even we're not about BS3 because of the we haven't been able to know strategy by activity and ensuring that because of engineering our approach that's getting going. But now that there is an injection, it should actually help us. We are indeed engaging other departments. We've even written letters to all HODs, DGs, municipal heads, heads of entities, where we are selling our products because we are a business, so we need to go out and sell. The chair spoke about certification, now the transfer, so that we can enable now via our subsidiary project, and we already carry with that, and that's part of what we're doing. So those issues are happening. The relationship with DHA is quite interesting. We've already agreed with them for 2 areas. They are going to use 2 of our premises programs that will start in part of this digitization project of theirs. So they agreed with food and price. They come into the premises. They're now going to be looking at that. So they will come and rent space from the post office because we have big warehouses, etc. So they are going to do that. But other if you pick up the post office where you are able to access other services, including DHA, so we are pricing that. So when you walk into the post that's something DHA, and you have the Postbank, you have ourselves, and the private sector for selling the proposals and or it's time. So we are using our policy what the infrastructure as a service. We have the infrastructure coming with it. So that's what we have. The Department of Transport also involved in property to the work with them. And we want to also expand into the delivery of the extra licenses and to other of their products. The Honorable Colabana asked around what is exactly going to do to use the 2.4 billion. So when you go to Treasury, let me say, when we went to Treasury, we said to Treasury, we would like to get, we asked for more than the 2.4 by the way. So our budget breakdown was more than, they came there to ask the cut your cloth because it must be what we had. And we said to them, we would like to take a billion rand broken into 4 areas, and we want to implement the strategy. Because if we do anything else with this money, after implementing the strategy and bringing in revenue, we are going to pay. For us, there's no 2 ways out. If we take this money and just pay off all our debts, we are going to be here 7 months down the line, and we're going to have no money. So what we then did was we broke it down to 4 areas around the trust center that we spoke about. Take revenue immediately. And modernizing our branches of the center. The question around how can you say we are talking about post office of tomorrow, but you spend 1% on your on modernizing? How else do you do that? So we put 300 million there for the digitalization and the modernization. Logistics, modernization, and warehousing, and ensuring that we are paying the compensation. Also, what is because you only make 1% from the what is the KPI? What is in the name, etc. So that for us is important. There are issues around our point of sale hardware and software. You walk into your branch, the machine from work. We need to start it. So we put money for that. We also put 700 million for a reduction of staff costs, which then also includes establishing the employee us, and then turn around and guarantee business for them. That's how you try to sort this out. Any process that we together 700 now are you able to do one some of them are saying give you discount, and some of them say please can you write off your interest and the penalties, and some of them are saying yes we can, some of them are saying no we can't, others are saying some are paying by money. So we are looking at how much that we can even recognize that. So that would be in our book, it was 2.417. That's what we put in front of the Minister of Finance. But I think the rights are very weak. But what the Honorable Malala was asking, we have to wait for them and we must can't do anything at the back. So we approve it on the basis of the breakdown that happened. So we have to wait for them. Now, the other one is the issue around medical aid payments. It's a problem for us, because the problem for us everywhere is that our members or our employees then get suspended, so they don't get paid, covered by the government. Up until the end of December, we were up to date. So we are now behind by 2 months on all 3 or 4 medical aids that cover us. This is the letter that we hope you will be able to correct within this week's so, but otherwise we have tried to catch up. The medical issue is a separate issue, and it is going to come there that we haven't actually covered the mechanisms coming to the report. The question was asked in a different manner than around the obligation to provide branches for the Postbank. I also know that in the Act itself, the Postbank itself is obliged to do everything with the post office first, before it can go out and report. But also, the minister is very clear about what we do with our branches in terms of how is it that we do not affect the Postbank when we close them. But remember, some of the branches we do close ourselves. Most of the branches actually that some of them were profitable, we would have liked to have kept them, but we were kicked out. So that's something that we need to talk about. Yes, we did start some issues this past week. We didn't have enough money to pay for the fuel. In fact, we still have cars up in our yard that couldn't pay the fuel card, and the fuel card was switched off. And therefore, our drivers are sitting there, they can't go to the river. The cars are there, the lane is affected. So those are the kind of problems that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Before the start of this meeting, I had a standing cash flow discussion with the finance team. Even before the start of this meeting, they have to say, CEO, there's X amount in the bank, and so that we can pay, who do we pay first, that's how we've been running this business for the last quite unhelpful. Now, I will send the number of the direct email, and there are specific 2 people that we put on, making sure that they are able to assist the customers. There is a crime and the fraud. There is a small amount of it committed by our people, but the steps that we show were crime and fraud and robberies happening against the post office. Where they're looking for this data money, and so the bulk of it is that we work very closely with SEPs, and SEPs are always making sure that those people are paying. And honorable was asking about how the number that is presented, how many are free of charge. As the vote, it's a moving target. We leave this office how is the supposed to serve the people going forward? So you will find that you will see at the station you will see as where the places where people are going to, because the important thing is how do people access to our so the other question, I think the chair a question of my time, and then you respond to facilitate with us all the which is between the and now I've spoken asking around cost that you already because that you that's what I keep. Question and they use the taking them all to the system and to assist the big issue on that it must be all to ensure that it's really not the best way to run business. Very important question with the liquidation first step and we are now the last question most of them are when we try to come in in this paper, you require contracts. Contracts come with a higher price than those are what they require. And what we are now doing is we are going to convert and we train them and then convert some of the security work. So when we spoke about security reduction, none of our own employees are it's all an outsourced process, but we are moving on of that. But I think we've pretty much covered and what is the question? Yes, I have said to the Honorable Konapana, we will send it to them by the email. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you. I wanted to, because the post office issue is Deputy Minister, I think issue. And sometimes there's also misinterpretation of what that affects. And on that there is sport questions. I know that's not a few of but we to proceed to get to the Postbank. There was a reason we combined the two. And with the Postbank, showing about just 2 questions left on that part. Will then Deputy Minister come to you on those 2 questions? The issue about the signing off, as it relates to the measure, and probably the issue about the SAPC contribution. And would close at that point, honorable members, and allow that, because the other questions can't specifically can be responded to Deputy Minister by just writing back to the committee. If members of still want further engagement, we'll deal with it in the scheduling of meetings in that scope. Now that we're coming physically, we may be able to do even more traveling to the committee and getting permission to join, or if there's a need for members to be there. But take more time to deal with most of the issues that are before the committee. In the same way, we are responsible. So Postbank, I think we can speak to solutions we in particular, this come back to this point because it looks at the top of new entity that they need for money for that. I can just re-emphasize that point again, so that to actually like I said, the minister will just speak to a measure as well as the EP wants to respond. Let's say this is the last one, and then we close. If you
on the Postbank, I believe there is a chair of the board on the platform. And always the chair should be on the platform.
Or you want me to respond? Yeah, I would just say if you can give a response to that part of the Postbank, and then that's cool. The questions that is true. The questions that is true.
Okay, maybe let me try. I think the questions are big technical to respond. The board to respond. Because I picked up this on the statistics. There's also a question on the issue of financial performance of the Postbank. May I check not only as the board should respond to the time, if it's possible. What I can say is that we are positioning the board. There's the board, the Postbank. There's a new board, and I understand they've been in until midnight yesterday. We're trying to process that's the board is today. So they are in the process of filling the vacancies. The senior management, CEO, as well as the other executives, so that they can prepare themselves and to assume the new responsibilities that will come with the passing of the amendment bill. Chair, what I wanted to talk to are just a couple of things. Maybe just first on the BBI Sentech measure. In this respect, I would like to refer to page 2 of the presentation by Sentech on the roadmap on where we are in the response. So the last 3 bullet points speaks to the delay in the finalization of the offer that is supposed to be signed by the minister. So it says that to date, the minister has not responded to the SSA. The minister is requesting to develop a BBI turnaround plan by the 15th of March. So the expectation is that BBI is supposed to respond to some of the issues that are contained in the due diligence, part of which deals with the BBI and the minister is requesting Sentech as part of the application to develop this plan to present to her by the 15th of March. And once it's presented, then all the other actions are the next couple of them. And follow through. I don't want to get too much into the details about the teachers. Enough time, but it does surface some of the issues which I think some of them have always been aware of about the financial performance of the BBI and the history regarding that. And so the minister is saying, as part of preparation for takeover, please work on this turnaround plan. And I believe that the BBI is Sentech as an entity that is acquiring the BBI is working on that instance request. Just to say, Chair, on the SAPC, I'm going to, I think the CEO and the CFO must respond to the details that has been proposed. But just to say that I think we should all share in the concerns and I think we kept on raising this thing as a new, and I think the entity and it's something that has been interesting the performance around financial viability of this. You would recall, Chair, that there was a turnaround plan which was been audited, and every time they come here to present so we did about 5 or 6 key issues, one of which was financial performance. On all of them, you can recall that it was almost 100%. But as it relates to the area of financial viability, that's where the concern has always been, and it's something that please look at the decline of your revenue, because the revenue has been declining. The only thing that was keeping the SAPs continue to be a concern is because of the bailout that was being received. Otherwise, if you look at the financial statement, the balance sheet, you're going to pick up at that point. Now that continues. And of course, that we're expecting that the new board is also going to give. There are various issues, some of which was presented about the impact of that, which is something that is coming now. But over the past 3 years, it has not been such a big issue, except that there was COVID and there was other things. So, in terms of the bigger issues, we are bringing the SAPC Parliament, which will look at some of those issues, because if you look at the SAPC, part of the things that need to be attended to is around funding of the public service mandate, which for now is still not very clear, because some of the revenue that comes from the commercial activities is used to cross-subsidize the public service obligations of the SAPC. So there is a need for proper restructuring in the SAPC, so we will be hopefully attending by bringing that bit. But it is a concern. This next year, as you know, is the last year of the bailout. How much is remaining? $1 billion. Yeah, so it's an issue, Chair, which I think we do share in the concerns that we expressed by all members here. As you know, that we went through the board and to attend to some of this, we're waiting for the board to come in. When is the board going to be appointed? I wish I knew Honorable you are quite aware, me and Will, that once the National Assembly finalizes that process, it's a recommendation to the President to appoint the board. And so the recommendation has been sent to the President. I'm aware that there has been some clarity that the President has got from the Speaker of the National Assembly for Parliament. I am not sure whether the committee has been taken on board, but I am aware that activity has been solved. And as soon as that is clarified, the President will proceed to appoint the board as soon as the clarifications are concluded. I wish I could have the answers, but I'm not the appointing authority. Chairperson. Now, Honorable Botlano was talking about the point of BBI has taken a long. And you know, we do interact with our colleagues from other countries in some of the forums that we attend. And the emphasis which is placed on connectivity and rolling out of broadband, it's something that we should take an approach, for which I think we are doing now through the program of SA Connect, for which we have designated the BBI to be the implementing agent. Through that, I think BBI will also have to redeem itself. It will also have to, because there is 2.7 billion people who are not connected, who don't have access to the internet throughout the world. A significant part of that is from the developing countries. In South Africa, we do have lots and lots of people who don't have access to the internet, despite the reach of mobile, the reach of so BBI should, we support BBI should play the role that it's supposed to play in this conflict, in this connectivity to roll out. And I don't want to waste a lot of time. I don't want to waste a lot of work like this. The issue of consequence management, which has been raised very sharply here. Almost all the honorable members from Honorable Majosi, almost all the members, I think we do share your concern that immediately when we institute consequence management, and there's no mechanism to stop them from resigning. So I think it's something that we will take back. I think for the items listed here, we'll just engage with the entities. I think there's an incentive which largely affected to understand whether there is still more than we can do. But I think it also requires that some regulations has to be tightened from the Department of Public Service and Administration. A concern. So I would like to waste any more of your time. Thank you.
Mr. Honorable members, like I said, with access to funding. But I think everyone understands all the main points. Of course, for the other items which we offer committee adoption, of course, we can be able to that. Especially, we have a responsibility.
Recording